My name is Isabella Monroe. I'm 22 years old, and the night it all began is burned into my memory like a scar I can't erase. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening, just me and my older brother Nathan sitting in the kitchen while the rain hammered against the windows. But ordinary slipped away in a heartbeat. I caught him whispering to my parents in the next room, words muffled, but one phrase rang clear enough to split me open. She'll never be anything. She'll fail like she always does. In that instant, something inside me cracked, but instead of falling apart, I felt a fire light up in my chest. I wish I could tell you I stormed into the room and confronted them right then. But I didn't. I sat frozen, spoon halfway to my mouth, the taste of lukewarm soup turning to ashes on my tongue. The kitchen clock ticked loud, almost mocking me, and every tick reminded me of what Nathan thought I couldn't do. What he believed I'd never be. My own brother, the boy who used to carry me on his shoulders when we were kids, was now my biggest skeptic. And in that silence, I made a promise to myself. Not out loud, not for anyone to hear, but inside, where it mattered most, I'll prove him wrong. Not just him, everyone. The house suddenly felt smaller that night. My parents' footsteps echoed upstairs, Nathan's laughter drifted from the living room, and I sat there alone at the kitchen table, tracing circles in the condensation of my glass. My mind kept replaying his words, like a broken record I couldn't shut off. That's when the first spark of my secret was born. It wasn't polished. It wasn't even fully formed. But it was alive, and it whispered to me with every beat of my heart. The days that followed looked normal on the surface. I still attended community college, still worked my part-time shift at the bookstore, still smiled when people asked how I was doing. But underneath, I was different. My eyes searched for opportunities in every corner. My brain started sketching out possibilities, even while I stood at the cash register ringing up someone's novel. One evening, as I walked home from work, I stopped at a coffee shop I'd never noticed before. It was nearly empty, the smell of roasted beans clinging to the air. I pulled out my notebook, the one I usually filled with half-finished poems and doodles, and instead, I started writing bullet points. No clear plan, just fragments of ideas. Create something of my own, something undeniable, something no one can dismiss. The barista noticed my scribbles and asked, "Big project?" I smiled faintly and lied, "Just homework." But inside, I knew it was more. It was the beginning of something no one else could see yet. Still, I didn't feel ready to share it. Not with my parents, not with my brother, not with anyone. That's why it became a secret. Secrets, I learned, are fragile things. They need protecting, nurturing. If you speak them too soon, they wither. So I carried mine quietly, like a glowing ember in my pocket. But carrying a secret changes how you see the world. I started noticing things I'd overlooked before, the way my parents casually compared Nathan's successes to my potential, the way my friends joked about me being the dreamer, the way even professors sometimes doubted I could keep up. Every dismissal, every smirk, they all became fuel. The first real test of my resolve came 2 weeks later. My best friend Lila invited me to a weekend trip with the group. Normally, I'd have said yes without hesitation, craving the distraction, the laughter. But I looked at my savings account, looked at the half-formed sketches in my notebook, and said, I can't. I've got something I need to work on. She tilted her head, puzzled. On a Saturday night? You're seriously turning us down. I laughed it off, but inside, the choice stung. Friendships had always been my lifeline, yet here I was, learning to say no for the sake of a secret no one else understood. And when I shut my bedroom door that Saturday evening, sitting under the dim glow of my desk lamp, it felt both lonely and electric. I wasn't out with friends. I wasn't making memories. I was building something invisible. Something that, one day, would speak louder than any night of fun. Of course, not every night felt like progress. Some nights, I stared at the blank page and wondered if Nathan was right. What if I was destined to fail? What if this secret stayed just that, a secret, never strong enough to become reality. One night, frustration boiled over. I slammed my notebook shut so hard the pen rolled off the desk. My mom knocked on the door, asking softly, "Everything okay, sweetheart?" I wanted to tell her everything, but when I opened the door, her eyes already carried that familiar worry, the kind reserved for someone fragile, someone you don't expect much from. And I couldn't bear to see my secret crumple under her gaze. So I just nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just tired." She believed me, or maybe she wanted to. The turning point came on a stormy Thursday. I'd stayed late at the bookstore, closing up alone, the rain thrumming against the windows. As I wiped down the counter, a thought hit me so sharply I had to sit. What if this secret wasn't just about proving Nathan wrong? What if it was about proving myself right? That shift changed everything. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redemption, mine. And in that moment, with thunder cracking overhead, I knew this was no longer just an idea. It was a mission. I won't tell you what happened next just yet, but I will say this. That single night, when I overheard my brother's words, set me on a path I could never have imagined. A path I walked alone, in silence, carrying a secret that grew heavier and brighter with every passing day. And it all began because of one devastating sentence, spoken in a dimly lit living room, on a night that should have been ordinary. Before I share what happened after that night, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, you're going to want to hear what came next. The night I made my decision, I barely slept. My mind pulsed with ideas, like stars flickering on a black sky. Every time I shut my eyes, a new possibility surfaced. An app interface, a design sketch, a line of code. By sunrise, my notebook was already filled with scribbles, arrows, and wild questions. I didn't know where this road would lead, but I knew I couldn't turn back. The first challenge was time. My day job at the small accounting firm consumed 9 hours, plus another hour stuck in traffic. By the time I made it home, exhaustion usually sat heavy on my shoulders. But now, exhaustion had to wait its turn. I'd kick off my heels, pull my hair into a mess of bun, and sit down at my rickety desk with a cup of stale coffee. Midnight became my morning, and my apartment, no matter how quiet, turned into my battlefield. I remember one night in particular, the rain tapping furiously against my window, thunder rolling in the distance. My laptop screen glowed faintly as I typed, my fingers trembling from both fatigue and adrenaline. Suddenly, my program crashed. Lines of work I had poured into it disappeared like smoke. I buried my face in my hands, my chest tightening. "That's it," I whispered into the dim room. "I can't do this." But then, my phone buzzed. A simple notification. Reminder, dreams don't work unless you do. It was something I had set weeks earlier, half as a joke, half as a dare to myself. Somehow, it jolted me upright again. I opened the laptop, retyped every lost line, and pushed until dawn bled through the blinds. The grind didn't just drain me physically, it carved into my social life. Invitations from friends stacked up in my messages, most unanswered. "You're always busy," one of them texted, followed by a half-joking emoji. Birthdays, dinners, even lazy Sunday brunches slipped through my fingers. My mother's voice on the phone carried its quiet disapproval. "Caroline, you're isolating yourself. Life isn't just about work." But what could I say? She wouldn't understand the fire under my skin, the constant itch to create. "I'll make it up to you, Mom. I promise," I replied, though guilt stung sharper than I admitted. Bills piled higher, too. I started skipping takeout lunches, opting for peanut butter sandwiches. My clothes wore thin, my apartment cluttered with thrift store finds. Some nights, I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder if I was making a colossal mistake, pouring myself into something that might never see daylight. Still, the grind had its hidden victories. The first time my prototype actually worked, even in the most basic form, I nearly screamed. The code responded, the system ran, and for a few fleeting seconds, I saw a glimpse of what this could become. My heart pounded so loudly, I had to press my hand against my chest. And then there were the late-night alliances, the quiet friendships forged online. I stumbled into forums filled with dreamers like me, people fighting invisible battles at kitchen tables and in basement corners. We traded tips, lifted each other up, and vented about failures. I wasn't alone anymore. There was something powerful about sharing frustrations with someone who typed back, "Keep going. You're closer than you think." The grind also tested my resilience in ways I never expected. One Friday night, my power went out during a storm, erasing hours of progress. I sat in the dark, listening to the rain hammer the roof. My first instinct was despair. My second was laughter, bitter, sharp, but also freeing. I lit 3 candles, set my notebook on the table, and kept sketching ideas by hand. If electricity abandoned me, pen and paper would not. Weeks bled into months. My sleep schedule collapsed into fragments. 2 hours here, 4 hours there. Coffee shops became my second home, the background chatter a strange comfort. The baristas knew my name, my order, and the shadows under my eyes. "Still at it," one of them asked once, sliding me a latte. "Still at it," I replied with a weary smile. And yet, behind every grind, there lurked doubt. Some mornings, staring at my reflection, I barely recognized the woman looking back. My hair hung limp, my skin pale from fluorescent screens. Was I building something meaningful, or just chasing shadows? But doubt had a rival, stubbornness. Every setback only deepened my resolve. Every missed social outing became another brick in the foundation of what I was creating. There were moments of beauty, too. One late night, as the city outside hushed into silence, I watched my program finally run a flawless test. My entire apartment felt charged with electricity, as if the universe itself paused to witness. I laughed, cried, and whispered into the still air, "This is it. This is real." And in that whisper lay a secret vow. I wouldn't let the grind consume me for nothing. If I had to bleed energy, sacrifice comfort, and endure loneliness, then the result had to be extraordinary. So, I pressed on. The grind became my rhythm, my shadow, my second skin. I walked through life with 2 worlds colliding inside me. The one everyone saw, tired Caroline with her simple job and quiet existence, and the one no one saw, where sparks of invention lit up the darkness and possibility thrived in every keystroke. And while the outside world kept dismissing me, I began to realize something. This wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. This was about proving to myself that I could hold on, even when everything tried to pull me apart. Because hidden behind every weary glance, every sacrifice, and every invisible struggle was a secret no one else could see, one that was slowly, quietly, taking shape in the dark. The grind had etched itself so deeply into my life that I almost didn't notice the shift when it began. At first, the changes were subtle, like the quiet way dawn light slips into a room, softening shadows before you realize the night is gone. My project, once fragile and uncertain, began to take form. What was once a jumble of scattered notes and half-broken code slowly started breathing on its own. One night, after weeks of rewriting the same stubborn line of code, the screen finally lit up with a flawless result. I stared at it for a full minute, unsure if I was hallucinating. Then I laughed, not the tired chuckle I'd grown used to, but a full, sharp sound that startled me. I clapped my hands once, as if sealing the moment. The system worked, not perfectly, not yet, but it was alive. That was the first sign of transformation. The weight on my shoulders shifted from endless labor to the thrill of possibility. Instead of dragging myself to the desk, I found myself rushing to it, eager to peel back the next layer. The more the project grew, the more it grew inside me. I noticed it in my posture, how I carried myself a little taller when walking into work. I noticed it in my conversations, though I never mentioned specifics. My voice carried a quiet confidence, as if I were holding a secret jewel no one else could see. But transformation isn't always graceful. Some nights, progress slipped through my fingers as fast as I caught it. A small victory would collapse under the weight of a new era, and I'd find myself back at square one. Yet something inside me had changed. Instead of despair, I felt determination. Failure no longer meant the end. It meant the next step. I tested my work obsessively, recording each tiny success. Every green check mark, every smooth run, every neatly aligned design added a new brick to the invisible structure I was building. Soon, I had not just fragments but a foundation. One Saturday morning, sunlight streaming through my blinds, I sat back and scrolled through the interface I had pieced together. For the first time, it looked less like a patchwork and more like a whole. My heart swelled in a way that brought tears to my eyes. "This is real," I whispered to myself. "This is actually real." Transformation wasn't only in the project, it was in me. The same Caroline who once questioned everything now carried an inner steadiness. My reflection in the mirror still showed tired eyes, but they held a fire that hadn't been there before. The outside world began to sense it too, though they couldn't place why. At work, my boss raised an eyebrow when I handled a particularly messy account with a calm precision that surprised even me. "You've changed," he said casually, flipping through the papers. "Have I?" I asked, keeping my face neutral. He shrugged. "More collected, I guess." I smiled faintly, hiding the truth in my chest. If only he knew. But transformation also brought loneliness into sharper relief. My friends had grown distant, their invitations fewer now. I scrolled through social media and saw them at rooftop parties, weekend getaways, cozy dinners. A pang of longing struck, but it was dulled by something else. Pride. I wasn't there with them, no, but I was building something they couldn't yet imagine. There were other small moments of validation. A stranger online tested a feature I had nervously shared in a hidden forum. Their feedback wasn't glowing, but it wasn't dismissive either. It was constructive, useful. Someone outside of me saw potential in what I was making. That night, I celebrated with a bowl of instant noodles, grinning at the screen as if I had just won an award. Transformation often creeps in through the cracks of daily routine. I noticed it while walking home one evening, the city buzzing around me. Before, I would drag my feet, shoulders hunched, counting the minutes until I could collapse into bed. Now, even with exhaustion tugging at me, my steps carried a quiet rhythm, as if my body had synced to a new purpose. I also noticed it in the way fear loosened its grip. At the beginning, every error felt like proof I wasn't enough. But slowly, failure became data, information to adjust, not condemnation to endure. That shift reshaped me from the inside out. Of course, there were setbacks that tested the transformation. One evening, my laptop froze and refused to restart. Panic seized me, my throat tight as I imagined losing months of progress. My hands trembled as I scrambled for backup drives. When I finally recovered most of the files, relief washed over me so intensely that I laughed through tears. A year ago, that disaster would have broken me. Now, it only steeled me further. Transformation also revealed itself in the way my apartment changed. Once cluttered with takeout boxes and scattered notebooks, it slowly shifted into a space of focus. I cleaned more often, organized my desk, even bought a second monitor. It wasn't luxury, it was survival. My environment began to mirror the order taking root in my mind. One late night, leaning back in my chair, I realized something. I no longer dreaded the grind. What once felt like punishment had become ritual. The sacrifices still hurt, but they hurt less because I had grown stronger. I began to notice physical changes, too. My back straightened, my eyes sharper despite the long hours. There was a resilience in my body, as if it had adapted to this new life. The transformation wasn't about becoming unbreakable. It was about bending without snapping. I could bend around exhaustion, around loneliness, around failure, and still keep moving forward. And perhaps the most striking shift was this. I stopped craving recognition. In the beginning, every ounce of effort was fueled by the thought of proving others wrong. But now, Sitting alone in the glow of my screen, I realized I didn't need their validation. The work itself, the growth it carved into me, was enough. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, the quiet hum of my computer steady beside me. The project had transformed, but so had I. And though the world hadn't seen it yet, I carried the proof within me, in every scar of failure, every spark of progress, every night I refused to give up. This was no longer just a secret grind. It was becoming a new life, one built piece by piece, line by line, victory by victory. And deep inside, I knew the transformation had only just begun. The hum of my computer lingered in the stillness of the night, but inside me, something was louder, an age that had been swelling for weeks, refusing to stay hidden any longer. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the interface glowing across two screens. It wasn't just a patchwork of code anymore. It was polished, intuitive, something that looked like it could belong in the hands of thousands, maybe millions. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to show it. The thought alone sent a shiver through me. For months, I had lived in secrecy, letting the world think I was treading water when I was quietly building a ship. But transformation means nothing if it's never seen. A creation locked away is only half alive. I knew the moment had come. I started small. The following morning, with my heart hammering, I drafted a message to a group of early tech enthusiasts on a private forum. My hand shook so much that I kept mistyping the subject line. Prototype available for testing. The words felt too bold, like I was calling myself out as a fraud. But I clicked send before doubt could claw it back. Hours crawled by. I refreshed the thread obsessively, every minute stretching like an hour. Finally, a reply popped up. Then another. And another. Interesting concept. UI feels smooth. Never seen it done quite like this. I exhaled so hard I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath. The feedback wasn't perfect. Bugs were flagged, features questioned, but the tone was different. This wasn't dismissal. This was engagement. Real people were touching something I made, and it was sparking conversation. That night, I didn't sleep. Not out of worry, but because I was electrified. The reveal had begun, and it wasn't something I could tuck back into the shadows. The next step terrified me more. If strangers could see its value, could people closer to me? My family's words still haunted me, their disappointment pressed into every memory like fingerprints on glass. Part of me wanted to protect myself by staying silent. But another part, the stronger part, ached to finally flip the script. One Sunday afternoon, I found myself standing outside my parents' house. The familiar brick, the porch swing that creaked with the slightest breeze, all of it stirred something heavy in my chest. I hadn't been there in months, not since that night they told me to leave. The door opened before I knocked. My mother blinked, startled, as if she'd seen a ghost. "Caroline," she whispered. I swallowed, my palms damp. "Hey, Mom." The living room hadn't changed. The same framed family photos, the same scent of old books and lavender polish. But the silence was louder now, filled with everything unspoken between us. Dad sat in his recliner, arms crossed, expression guarded. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said flatly. "I know," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I came to show you something." Mom glanced nervously between us. "Caroline, is everything okay?" "Better than okay," I said, pulling my laptop from my bag. My fingers hovered over the lid for a moment, heart thundering, before I opened it. The screen lit up, my project shining back at me. I spun it toward them, hands trembling. This is what I've been working on." Dad's frown deepened. "Some kind of app?" "Yes, but not just an app. It's a platform. It helps small businesses streamline operations, cut down costs, and expand online visibility. It's already being tested by people outside my circle." Mom leaned forward, eyes scanning the interface, her brow furrowing in concentration. "You made this? Alone?" I nodded. Every line of code. every design choice, every late night. The silence that followed stretched endlessly. My father's skepticism pressed down on me like a weight, but my mother's eyes softened with something almost like pride. "Show us how it works," she said quietly. So I did. I walked them through each feature, each function, my voice gathering strength with every word. It wasn't just a demo, it was my soul laid bare. When I finished, Dad sat back, exhaling slowly. His face was unreadable, but his voice carried a note I hadn't heard in years. "That's impressive." It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a crack in the wall. And for me, it was enough. That night, driving home under a sky scattered with stars, I felt a shift inside me. The reveal wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about finally standing in my truth, without fear. Word spread faster than I anticipated. A colleague at my day job stumbled across the forum thread and approached me at lunch. "Hey, Caroline, is this yours?" he asked, holding up his phone with my project glowing on the screen. I froze, caught between panic and exhilaration. "Yeah," I admitted cautiously. His grin widened. "This is brilliant. You know people are already talking about it, right?" My stomach flipped. Talking about it. Not me, it. The project had grown legs, walking out into the world on its own. Soon, more people reached out. Friends I hadn't heard from in months. Acquaintances who suddenly saw me differently. Some were curious. Some were supportive. And some, predictably, were envious. But the noise around me didn't matter as much anymore. I had crossed the line from hidden grind to visible impact. One evening, I sat at a cafe with my laptop open, watching as a new wave of users signed up for beta access. Each notification was a reminder. The reveal wasn't just a moment. It was a movement, rippling outward in ways I hadn't even planned. A barista paused by my table, glancing at my screen. "Hey, that's been popping up online. People are saying it's the next big thing. That yours?" I smiled, closing the laptop gently. "Yeah, that's mine." The words felt right, and solid, undeniable. The big reveal wasn't fireworks or a dramatic announcement. It was this, a quiet unveiling that grew louder with every new voice, every curious glance, every nod of recognition. It was proof that the nights of silence, the doubts, the sacrifices hadn't been for nothing. As I walked home that night, the city lights flickering like constellations, I realized something profound. I wasn't hiding anymore. My work was no longer a secret burden. It was out there, breathing, growing, demanding to be seen. And for the first time, so was I. The night air still clung to me as I stepped off the city sidewalk and stared at the outline ahead. The house. My house. It didn't look like much at first glance. 2 stories of weathered brick, shutters that leaned slightly from years of storms, a porch that had forgotten what fresh paint felt like. But there was something about it that made my chest tighten. It wasn't just a building. It was a monument, a survivor, the only thing left standing after everything else had crumbled. I had signed the papers 2 days earlier, the ink drying on what felt like the first real proof of ownership I had ever held. Not a lease, not a borrowed key, not a place where I was tolerated. Mine. The thought alone left my hands trembling against the cool metal of the gate. When I pushed it open, the hinges groaned as if they were waking from a long sleep. I stepped inside the yard, the crunch of gravel under my shoes oddly loud in the silence. The garden was overgrown, weeds wrapping themselves around the skeletons of what had once been roses. A swing swayed lazily from the branch of a gnarled oak, creaking in rhythm with the breeze. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and cedar. My footsteps echoed through the empty rooms, each one carrying the weight of a life that was finally becoming my own. The walls bore faint outlines where picture frames had once hung, and a crack split across the ceiling like an old scar. Yet instead of seeing flaws, I saw possibilities. I traced my fingers across the wooden banister, its varnish worn smooth by countless hands before mine. For a moment, I wondered about the lives that had filled this place, families who had laughed here, argued here, dreamed here. Their echoes lingered, but now it was my turn to leave something behind. Setting my laptop on the old dining table, I powered it on. Notifications blinked to life, reminding me that the outside world was moving, buzzing, waiting. But here, in this house, time felt suspended. This wasn't just shelter, it was a foundation. A fortress where I could build without fear of being thrown out, judged, or dismissed. Still, there was unease buried beneath the awe. Ownership carried weight. Responsibility. The mortgage papers were heavy in my mind, every digit a reminder of risk. But for once, the fear didn't paralyze me. It fueled me. Because this wasn't a gamble, it was a statement. I wasn't drifting anymore. I had planted myself. That first week was chaos. The roof leaked when the rain came. The pipes coughed rust-colored water, and the electricity flickered whenever the wind pressed too hard against the windows. Friends told me I should have picked a sleek condo downtown, something easy, something clean. But that wasn't the point. This wasn't about convenience. It was about roots. One evening, as I was unpacking, I found an old showbox tucked inside the top shelf of the hallway closet. Dust coated its edges, but the lid slid off easily. Inside were brittle photographs, sepia-tone portraits of families I didn't know, smiling awkwardly in Sunday clothes. A handwritten letter rested beneath them, edges curled with age. The words were faint, but legible. To whoever lives here next, take care of this house. It has held us through storms, sickness, and years when the world felt too heavy. We are leaving, but may it stand for you the way it has stood for us. I read it twice, my throat tightening. It felt less like a message and more like a passing of the torch. Suddenly, the cracked ceiling and squeaky hinges weren't imperfections. They were proof of survival. A few days later, I invited my parents to see it. Not as a plea for approval, not as a performance, but because deep down, I wanted them to witness it. When they arrived, Mom's eyes scanned the porch, the chipped steps, the ivy climbing up the walls. She touched the doorframe lightly, as though testing its strength. Dad, on the other hand, stood stiffly, his expression unreadable. "You bought this?" he asked, his tone carrying both disbelief and something sharper. "Yes," I said evenly. "It's mine." Mom's lips curved into a faint smile. "It feels solid. Lived in." Dad ran a hand along the wall, exhaling through his nose. For a long moment, silence pressed between us. Then he said, almost grudgingly, "Takes guts to take on a place like this." It wasn't praise, but it wasn't dismissal either. And somehow, that felt like progress. That night, after they left, I stood on the porch as the streetlights flickered on, bathing the road in pale gold. The house loomed behind me, a silhouette against the sky. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't perfect. But it was unshaken. As weeks turned into months, the house began to transform, not through contractors or glossy renovations, but through small, steady acts. I patched leaks. I repainted walls. I planted flowers where weeds had once ruled. Each change stitched me deeper into its fabric. One Saturday, I hosted a small gathering. Just a handful of friends, mismatched chairs around the table, laughter bouncing off the walls that had been silent too long. At one point, as I watched them sip coffee and share stories, I realized something that nearly brought me to tears. This house wasn't just standing, it was alive again. Later, when everyone had gone, I sat alone in the quiet. My laptop glowed softly on the table, numbers climbing higher, feedback rolling in from users who now relied on what I had built. Success was taking shape, steady and undeniable. But it wasn't the only thing that mattered anymore. I walked through the rooms, touching door frames, brushing my hand against the cool glass of the windows. Each step echoed not with emptiness, but with belonging. The house had stood through decades before me, and now it was standing with me, not as a symbol of struggle, not even as proof of victory, but as something stronger. Endurance, stability, a reminder that even when everything else falls away, some things can remain, waiting for you to step inside and claim them. As the night deepened, I climbed the creaky stairs and paused at the top, looking down the hallway bathed in shadows. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was comforting, a promise that I was no longer drifting, no longer unseen. The house stood, and so did I,